The Nintendo Entertainment System, for all its 8-bit glory, is mostly known for action games, platformers, beat-em-ups, and shooters. Meanwhile, computer games of the time usually offered something of a different breed of gaming, with strategy games or point-and-click adventure. Unfortunately, you probably would have had to sell your car to buy a computer capable of running these things back in the 80s. But did you know there were numerous computer games that eventually made their way onto the NES home console as well? Some of these worked pretty well, and some not so much. Nevertheless, it's interesting to see what some of the developers came up with to try to bring a passable computer gaming experience to the home console market with fairly limited hardware capabilities. Let's take a closer look at some computer games on the NES on this edition of Friday Night Arcade. Well, you can't get much more computer gamey than this. It's King's Quest V on the NES, a King's Quest game you can play right on your Nintendo. Wow! So, I really had no idea this even existed until a few years ago. I don't remember seeing it for sale anywhere. Seeing the Sierra logo on an NES game would have made my head explode as a kid, as I was used to Space Quest 3 at the time. Right up front, the game asks you if you've ever played King's Quest before. If you say yes, it takes you right into the game, whereas if you say no, you get a lengthy cutscene. King Graham is out for a walk when an evil wizard makes his castle disappear. Then Cedric the Talking Owl turns you into a pancake and you fly away together. At this point, Sierra Adventure Games had moved on to a point-and-click interface rather than text parser, and that actually translates decently to the NES. Pressing the B button brings up a menu screen with a few actions to choose from as well as your inventory, and you can use that to investigate and interact with objects in your environment. Unfortunately, the graphics are just yuck. It's really difficult to see what any items are, making puzzles unnecessarily difficult to solve. Not to mention the music is like nails on chalkboard. I honestly can't see any reason to play this now, and I'm not even sure that I would have had the patience to try to get through this as a kid. Well, here's something you don't see every day. The Immortal was originally released on the Apple IIgs and eventually made its way onto the Amiga, Atari ST, and DOS formats. You take control of a wizard tasked with rescuing another wizard somewhere down in the hellish labyrinths below. It's an isometric adventure game that's certainly intriguing on the surface. It looks and smells an awful lot like Diablo, which sounds like a potentially fascinating NES experience. Unfortunately, the NES just isn't able to keep up with this to make it much fun. There's stuff flying all over the place trying to kill you, as well as random trapdoors. You'd have to sit down with a notepad and make a map of where all the traps are just to make it through. You can cast fireballs while you're in the regular ISO view, and that's helpful for taking out these annoying bats that keep following you around, but occasionally you run into monsters as well. When you fight these, it goes into a special battle view, and you're gonna need the manual to figure this out. If you hold down either of the arrow keys and press B, you can do an attack with your staff. If you press A, you can duck. The green bars indicate your energy, while the red bars steadily rising indicate your fatigue factor. Wear yourself out and you won't be able to attack, but the monsters can wear themselves out too, so the book recommends ducking as often as you can to tire out the monsters and then attack them. But it seemed like no matter how often I ducked, they just kept doing damage to me anyway, so the only way I could really seem to make any progress was to just beat them senseless. Couldn't really seem to get through these battles without taking at least some damage. You don't get many hit points to start with, and health power-ups seem to be non-existent. Maybe if I spent a little more time with it, I'd get better, but I'd take too much damage in these monster battles and then get taken out by something cheap like a bat, trapdoor, or any one of the flurry of projectiles filling up the screen at any given second. The menus are kinda awkward too. For instance, when you open up a treasure chest, rather than just showing me everything in the chest all at once and letting me rummage through it Final Fantasy style, it goes through them one at a time and you have to decide whether or not you want to take it. So maybe this one was better left on computer, or maybe I'm missing something here. What do you think? Did you ever play this on either a computer or the NES? It's a shame too, because I think the graphics are really neat and detailed. You've got some pretty great sound effects, and the music is top notch, some of the best on the system. What in the world is this? Okay, if you've never heard of Elite before, it's one of the most highly regarded space trading games of all time. Programmed by Ian Bell and David Braben, this game raised the bar for what an open-ended space game could be in 1984, and they ported it to as many computer formats as they could. But wait, what the hell is it doing on the NES? That's right, you could play an open-world space simulator right on your 8-bit Nintendo Entertainment System, if you lived in Europe. So, unfortunately, this thing was PAL only, and after spending some time with it, I can sorta understand that decision, but it's still too bad. The developers clearly thought this would be too deep for an American audience used to pick up and play titles like Super Mario Bros. With a wealth of intricate menus and options to choose from, you're absolutely going to need to brush up on the dense manual included with the game. Players take control of a spaceship and you can make repairs, stock up on supplies, warp to other locations, trade, take up mining, embark on military missions, all while avoiding pirates, or you can be a pirate yourself. Whatever you want. The NES certainly wasn't capable of 3D, but they pulled off some serious fakery here with these wireframe graphics, and this is impressive to see in action, especially on an 8-bit machine. There's some great music tracks here too. Surprisingly, the menus aren't that complicated to manage while you're in spaceflight either. Holding down the B button takes control of this cursor on your dashboard, and you can pick from a variety of options on the fly. It's all quite seamless, but like I said, there's no way you can just pick this one up and play it, and you'll definitely need the manual to know what any of these options are for. This looks just awesome, and I'm gonna need some more time to wrap my head around this one properly. Okay, time to blow through some other computer games on the NES that I've already covered extensively in previous videos on the channel. First up is the MacVenture Series from ICOM Simulations. These point-and-click adventure games were originally available in various computer formats in the mid-80s before eventually being ported to the NES and published by Kimco. The three we got on the NES were Shadowgate, Deja Vu, and The Uninvited. The playstyle in each of these was all the same, although the stories were unrelated. Shadowgate sent you on an epic adventure into a castle to stop an evil warlock. Deja Vu placed you in the role of a grizzled detective with amnesia who's been framed for murder. And The Uninvited sent you into the depths of a twisted haunted house in search of your sister who's gone missing after a car accident. All of these games were ridiculously fun if you're into point-and-click adventure, and are definitely worth your time. If you want to know more about them, you can check out my previous individual videos I made for each of them in the past. And this one I just talked about recently, but it's worth mentioning again that SimCity was nearly released on the Nintendo Entertainment System. After SimCity became one of the most successful computer games ever, Shigeru Miyamoto met up with the creator of SimCity, Will Wright, to discuss releasing it on Nintendo hardware. A deal was struck and SimCity was featured in Nintendo Power as getting an NES release, as well as featured at the 1991 Consumer Electronics Show. However, it got cancelled and the Super NES version was released instead. Still though, it's neat to think that SimCity could have ran on 8-bit hardware, even if it was a little slow and wonky. A couple of working prototypes turned up recently at a retro gaming store in Seattle, and thankfully the Video Game History Foundation was able to dump a ROM from one of them for preservation and analysis. This ROM is freely available on the Video Game History Foundation's website if you want to check it out for yourself. I did a whole video about the backstory behind SimCity on the NES a few weeks ago if you're interested in finding out more about it. Last up, Sid Meier's Pirates. The name Sid Meier is synonymous with enjoyable simulation games, and Pirates is no exception. You take control of a group of pirates and you can just go around being pirates. This is one of those games I remember reading about Nintendo Power as a kid, but just never got a chance to actually buy it and never saw it anywhere for rent. There's a backstory here about how your character came out of poverty to join a ragtag group of pirates with promise of fortunes and loot. You can sail around picking fights with the French, or dock and visit the local towns for news and missions, as well as stock up on supplies. The game nudges you in a certain direction, but it's really up to you where you want to go, and this is truly an open world experience, something you didn't see much on an NES game. My only complaint is that when you're on land, your characters move slow as molasses, so just try to dock as close to the towns as you can. There's plenty to do in this game though, so if you're patient enough to learn, I think this would be an absolute blast to play. I wish I would have got a chance to play it as a kid. There are still a lot more computer games on the NES to cover, but we'll get to those another time. What did you think? Did you play any of these computer games on the NES growing up? What were some other computer games you would have liked to have seen ported to the NES at some point? As always, thank you for watching. Please don't text and drive, and I'll see you next time on Friday Night Arcade.